So there's two things to remember. Number one, there's a great book written by a friend of mine called The Speed of Trust. It's a New York Times bestseller, fantastic book, and talks about earning trust in the sales function, in the business world, right? And what he says is that if you want to be successful in sales, in business, you have to have high consideration, right, for your customer. But you also have to have high courage to do what you have to do. And it's the combination of high courage and high consideration that makes top performers. Because if you have a salesman that's high courage and low consideration, that's not going to be good for the homeowner, right? They're going to, they don't care about the homeowner. They'll take advantage of the homeowner, sell them stuff they don't need. So it's critically important we have high consideration. But in many, many cases, I've seen in this industry, guys have very high consideration. They want the best deal for their homeowner, but they have very low courage. And they can't ask those questions. You have to have both. You got to have high consideration for your homeowner. You got to have high courage for yourself. Another thing that kind of plays into this is, we talk about in sales that it's important that people like us, right? It's important that people like us. But if you have a desperate need to be liked, you will not ask the tough questions. If your need to be liked is so strong that you're not willing to risk because you think they're not going to like you if you ask them a tough question, you're going to struggle in sales because you have to be willing to ask those tough questions. So yes, it's great if they like you, but you can't be desperate for them to like you. You got to have the courage to ask the tough questions and let the chips fall where they may. Listen, you're going to ask these questions in a very respectful way, a very conversational, very professional way. But we do have to have the courage. And so how do you do it? I'm thinking back to a guy who worked for me years ago, great comfort advisor, and he just couldn't ask the tough questions. And finally one day I was talking to him. He called me on the way to a lead. And his name was, I said, just do it this once. Like, don't worry about getting this deal. Don't worry about if they like you. Don't worry about if you get a bad review. Just go in there and ask the tough questions as they're scripted out professionally, right, and respectfully, and see what happens. Well, 2 hours later, he calls me up. He got the deal. He goes, I can't believe it. He goes, they didn't mind that I asked the questions. He was so hung up that they were somehow going to be offended that he asked those questions. And so I think to answer your question directly is that it's like experiential therapy, right? Back in the day, if you were afraid to fly on a plane, they'd put you on a shrink's couch for 2 years and talk about your childhood. Now, if you're afraid to fly on a plane, they'll give you some counseling and put you on a plane, and when it doesn't crash, you get over your fear. So you just got to do it. You got to try it. And this is where role play comes into play, because if you can't do it in role play, you won't do it in the house. I know role play is awkward. People don't like to do it. But if you just take that one page and spend a half an hour to an hour with the team and just practice it over and over again, you'll screw it up a few times. We all do. But it's a pretty simple question. If on one hand you got multiple bids, some guys who can tell you anything, over here you got me that took care of Sarah Parker, which of those would you prefer? It's a simple question. And people are going to say, well, I prefer the company that took care of Sarah Parker. But you're absolutely right. We have to have the high consideration for our homeowner. We have to have the high courage for ourselves and ask the questions, because if we're so afraid that people aren't going to like us, then we'll never ask the tough questions. And my gosh, if you can't ask this question, how in the hell are you going to ask, can we start the paperwork? Can I get you an install date? Right? Those questions are going to be way tougher. If I can't ask these little questions, how the hell am I going to ask for the order at the end?